72 hours that shook America's auto industry, just 72 hours. That's all it took to expose a vulnerability no one in Washington wanted to admit existed. No warnings, no gradual slowdown, just silence. Factory floors across America went quiet. Machines that had been running nonstop for decades suddenly stopped mid-cycle. Workers stood still, staring at empty conveyor belts, parts bins, completely dry. And the question no one could answer was simple. What just happened? Because this wasn't a strike. It wasn't a natural disaster. It wasn't even a traditional trade war. This was precision. It began quietly, almost invisibly. Then suddenly, like a switch flipped, the lifeline of America's auto industry was cut. Wiring harnesses didn't arrive. Engine components were delayed. Critical structural parts simply never showed up. And within hours, the cracks started spreading. At General Motors, production lines slowed, then stalled. At Ford, shifts were canceled before they even began. At Stellantis, entire operations were thrown into chaos, not because of mismanagement, not because of demand, but because something far more dangerous had just been revealed. Dependency, you see. The American auto industry doesn't run on steel and engines alone. It runs on a system. A system built over decades, a system so interconnected that no single country controls it. And at the heart of that system was Canada. For years, parts have crossed the US-Canada border like clockwork, back and forth, again and again. Single component might travel across that border multiple times before it ever becomes part of a finished vehicle. It's not two industries, it's one. One machine, one ecosystem, and when that flow stops, everything stops. That's exactly what happened. Within 3 days, assembly plants that had never paused were forced to shut down lines. Instantly, Flint Assembly, known for heavy-duty trucks, dropped from full production to minimal output in hours. Fort Wayne, home of the Silverado, hit critical shortages almost immediately. Lansing Delta Township went completely dark. Not because the workers weren't ready, not because the machines failed, but because the parts never came. This wasn't chaos. This was calculated. Instead of broad tariffs or loud threats, a targeted approach was used. Specific components, critical nodes, the exact pressure points that would trigger maximum disruption in minimum time. And it worked. Because modern manufacturing doesn't have backups. Everything runs on timing. Hours, sometimes minutes. That's called just-in-time manufacturing. And it's incredibly efficient until it breaks. Then it collapses. And that collapse doesn't stay contained. It spreads. Ford plants in Ohio began reporting delays that turned into shutdown risks. Stellantis facilities struggled to maintain even partial production. Suppliers across multiple states were forced to halt operations because one missing piece made everything else useless. That's the reality most people don't see. One missing component doesn't slow a factory, it stops it. And as the situation escalated, the numbers became impossible to ignore. Analysts warned that nearly 40% of U.S. vehicle production could be affected within weeks. Dealership inventories, already low, started shrinking in real time. Prices, they weren't going to stay stable. An increase of 8 to 15% within weeks suddenly became a real possibility, and that's when it hit hardest. Not in boardrooms, not in political debates, but in everyday life. Families looking for a car, small business owners needing trucks. They were the ones who would feel it first, and then came the reaction. On live television, emotions took over: frustration, anger, disbelief. Words were spoken that would dominate headlines. But the reality on the ground didn't change. Factories were still quiet. Workers were still waiting, because this wasn't about politics anymore. This was about structure. For decades, North America built a shared manufacturing network. Not out of convenience, but out of necessity. Each country specialized. Each region contributed. Remove one piece, and the entire system feels it. One of the most overlooked elements: tooling. the massive dies used to shape metal parts. A significant portion of that capability exists outside the US. Without it, you don't just lose production, you lose the ability to even restart it. And that's where the real danger lies. Because restarting a broken supply chain isn't like flipping a switch. It takes time, months, sometimes years. And during that time, the damage compounds. Automakers scramble, schedules are rewritten, losses begin to stack, and competitors, they don't wait. While American production slowed, other global manufacturers continued moving forward. And that's the lesson. Power in today's world isn't just about size or strength. It's about understanding systems, understanding dependencies, understanding leverage. Because in a world built on interconnected supply chains, the strongest position isn't always the loudest one. It's the one that understands where the real control lies. These 72 hours weren't just a disruption. They were a demonstration. A reminder that modern industry doesn't run on assumptions. It runs on precision. And when that precision is interrupted, even the biggest systems in the world can come to a complete stop.